So today we're diving deep into a question that I think really defines modern frustration.
Mhm.
Here's the surprise, right? Most people in the world, and certainly in your professional sphere, are only separated by a few steps.
The famous 6 degrees of separation.
Exactly. But if we're all so close, why does getting something simple done, like, getting a question answered at work or a permit from the city, why does it feel like hitting a wall? Why is cooperation so exhausting?
It's the deep paradox of the small world. And that feeling, that exhaustion, is exactly what our sources are trying to isolate and measure.
Okay.
We're moving past this old assumption that just because you're physically close to someone, that automatically means you're capable of doing things together.
So our mission for this deep dive is to understand why that physical closeness so often just deteriorates into friction.
Right. Instead of creating agility.
We're asking, how does the structure of a system shape the actual amount of energy you have to spend just to get your goals met? Because it turns out that cost, that structural cost, is often the real limiting factor in our lives.
Well, for centuries, the main view in social sciences kind of reduced everything to the individual.
Personality, talent, that sort of thing.
Exactly. If you succeeded, you were driven. If you struggled, well, maybe you just lacked the talent or the motivation.
But then something shifted in the mid-20th century, a pretty profound scientific shift, actually.
It was. It forced us to see that individuals aren't these isolated units. They're defined by and they're bound by their networks.
And that led directly to the iconic small world experiments.
Precisely. Researchers like Stanley Milgram famously started to quantify this.
And later on, you had Duncan Watts and Stephen Strogatz formalizing the whole effort, right?
Yes, they were trying to systematically measure relational distance. Basically, how many handoffs does it take to get from you to anyone else on the planet?
And they came up with this term, separation level.
Right. A distance of 1 means you know them directly.
A distance of 2 means you know someone who knows them. And each handoff is a new level.
And what was so revolutionary was that they expected to find this vast, sparsely connected world. They thought it might take hundreds of steps to reach a stranger.
But they found the total opposite.
The total opposite.
Yeah.
Human societies are incredibly tightly interconnected networks. The average chain between any two people is, well, it's surprisingly short.
The power of that short chain is just immense. I mean, when relational distance is low, information should travel reliably.
Innovation spreads faster. Cooperation is easier.
And communities can adapt. The path is short, so the energy to use it should be low.
But, and this is the critical caveat that the research just screams at you, short distances carry everything, both the good and the bad.
So constructive processes and destructive ones.
Yes, proximity alone doesn't guarantee prosperity. In fact, if the relationships are full of mistrust, a short distance just makes conflict spread faster. The chain is only powerful if people are aligned toward a shared goal.
And this is where we get really practical, moving from the science of networks into your daily life. We have to be really clear here. Physical proximity, being in the same office, the same city, does not guarantee structural proximity.
Not at all.
Think about the struggles you face, the delays, the frustration. We tend to internalize it, don't we? We think, oh, I must not be good at this, or I didn't network well enough.
But the sources are so clear on this. The real problem is often external. It's in the length and, more importantly, the composition of that relational chain separating you from what you need.
This is measurable friction. It's not just a feeling.
Exactly.
And here's where it gets, for me, really interesting. This friction. It doesn't just add up. It multiplies.
It compounds.
It's like compounding interest, but for exhaustion. Every separation level, every handoff just increases the chance of a delay or an error or some misunderstanding.
And that multiplication translates directly to a cost for you, the individual. As that distance gets wider, you have to spend exponentially more of your personal energy.
Your time, your attention, your social confidence.
You're just convincing unfamiliar people to help. You're explaining the situation over and over, translating context across different departments, and just hoping the message gets through intact.
We see this structural burden everywhere. I mean, imagine a skilled worker on a factory floor trying to fix something.
Okay.
If the specialist with the answer is one step away, on the same team, the fix takes minutes. But if they have to go through, say, a help desk, then a procurement office, then another division.
Each with its own priorities.
Right. The worker struggles for days because no one shares the same immediate sense of urgency. Their incentives are aligned.
And it's the same pattern for a citizen trying to get a response from the city or a parent navigating a huge school system. Each layer is more friction.
And for a lot of people, especially those with limited time or money, a chain that goes beyond one or two of those steps, it just asks for more than they have.
Mhm.
So this structural friction, the research concludes, it becomes this huge limiting factor. It affects your opportunities way more than your own personal ability.
And that idea that your ability can actually take a back seat to the structure you're in, that forces us to look beyond just counting the steps.
Right.
The small world studies, they measure proximity, but they don't really assess if the relationships are aligned or if they're fragmented.
So to really get it, we have to analyze the structural glue that holds things together.
Yes.
So what is that glue? Our sources point to mission, vision, values, and purpose MVVP.
Which can sound like, corporate jargon.
It really can. But they're not. They're functional binding mechanisms. They're like a pre-negotiated common ground.
That's a great way to put it. When that MVVP is aligned, it dramatically changes the energy you need to activate a connection. And the story, the narrative, is the metastructure that ties it all together.
It's like a shared operating system.
Yes. So two people can communicate without having to rebuild the dictionary from scratch every single time they talk.
Okay, this brings us to a really powerful historical example, the kibbutz paradox. It just perfectly illustrates this difference between simple proximity and true alignment.
It does. The study details this one group of early 20th century Jewish pioneers. And they had the same motivation, the same skills, same aspirations.
And exact same people.
The exact same people. First, they worked at a place called Kinneret Farm. It was a collective, but despite all their hard work, it just dissolved. They failed.
Okay.
Then that same group founded a new place, Diganya, same land, same people. And it succeeded almost immediately.
Wait, hold on. That's actually shocking. The same people, same skills, fail in one spot and then thrive right next door. What was the difference? Was it just a small rule change?
The change was profound. Kinneret had a very loose, undefined structure. It lacked that cohesive alignment.
The MVVP.
Right. But Diganya was designed on these radically new principles, a really rigorous MVVP that was built to minimize relational friction. It made sure most interactions happened within a shared, high-trust, first-degree frame. The proximity didn't change, but the cost of using that proximity plummeted.
This makes us have to rethink what a one-step connection even is, because not all closeness is the same.
Not at all.
The sources break it down into three very different kinds of one-step proximity, and they each have a wildly different cost to cooperate.
Okay, so first, you have the tightly aligned team. You share a purpose, you share responsibility.
Here, cooperation is almost frictionless. You ask, they act. The trust is already there.
Then second, you have the broader organization or community. So this is a one-step connection where you share some general norms, you work for the same company, or live in the same neighborhood.
Cooperation is pretty easy, but it still takes a little bit of activation energy.
Right. And then there's the third type, the one that's the real high-friction killer, the connection across structures.
This is when you're physically one step away, say a colleague in a different department,
Yeah.
but your performance metrics are in direct conflict with theirs.
Your incentives are completely misaligned. You are literally negotiating across two different MVVPs.
The energy equation just snaps into focus. A one-step relationship inside a coherent structure has huge cooperative power, a low energy cost.
But that exact same one-step relationship that crosses a structural boundary.
It has a massive energy cost because you're building trust and alignment from zero every single time.
And to really see this friction quantified, we can look at the archetype of the Solinist farmer.
The Solinist farmer, that's the technical term for an independent farmer, right?
It is. And they are the structural opposite of the kibbutz. They might be physically close to their neighbors, but almost all of their important economic connections are outside their main high-trust structure.
Which is usually just their immediate family.
Exactly. So for the Solinist, every single task repairing equipment, getting advice, arranging transport, it all requires external coordination.
They have to find the right person, persuade them, negotiate a price, and then wait. The physical distance is small, but the structural distance is huge.
It's immense, and it's costly. There's no pre-existing contract of cooperation to fall back on.
So that farmer has to carry the full relational cost of every single interaction. Just think about that daily drain on your emotional, your cognitive, financial, and time reserves. It forces you to be conservative, to avoid big opportunities because they require too much coordination.
And this is just starkly laid out in the quantitative data our sources provide. They analyzed access to export services among different types of farmers, and you can literally measure the burden.
Okay, let's look at this bar chart. because this really puts numbers to the idea of structural burden.
So consider the Solanus farmers. They have to negotiate externally for almost all essential export services. Their internal support, the help they can get from a low-cost aligned relationship, is only about 15%.
15%. That means they are carrying 85% of the relational burden externally. That's astonishing.
Now compare that to LLC farmers, so those in private limited companies. They've built some internal structure. Their internal support is around 60%.
A huge improvement, but still, 4 out of 10 things they need, they have to go outside for.
But then you look at the kibbutz farmers. Because of that shared structure, that MVVP, they rely almost entirely on first-degree internal relationships,
How much?
around 90% internal support.
90%. The scale of that difference, from 85% external burden down to 10, it's exponential.
It is. What would be a multi-day struggle of negotiation for the Solanist becomes a simple, low-cost internal conversation for the kibbutz member. The structure just converted proximity into capability,
And this brings us to what our sources call the proximity principle.
which is the condition where a structure gives you abundant first-degree connections at a very low energetic cost, which lets members build up capability over time.
What I find so fascinating here is the analogy the researchers use. They say a well-designed organization acts like an enzyme in biology.
The enzyme analogy is perfect. In biochemistry, a chemical reaction needs a certain amount of activation energy to get started.
And if the energy barrier is too high, the reaction just doesn't happen.
Right. An enzyme doesn't add energy. It just lowers that activation barrier. It physically guides the different parts into the right position so the reaction happens easily.
So the structure, the MVVP, the rules, the norms, that's the enzyme for human cooperation. It guides people into positions so cooperation can happen with just a tiny nudge, a very low energy cost.
Which means that in these aligned systems, a second or even a third-degree connection might take less energy than a single high-friction step across a structural boundary. The structure itself does some of the work for you.
It carries the relational load.
Yes, through shared expectations and aligned incentives. People succeed not just because they got smarter, but because the system around them sustained them.
And this raises a pretty big ethical question, doesn't it?
It does.
When a system lowers the energy cost, it enables people, especially those with fewer resources, to keep their dignity and their agency. You can spend your energy improving your skills, not just fighting the bureaucracy.
And conversely, a structure that increases that cost forces people to burn through their limited reserves just on basic cooperation.
Instead of on developing their own abilities.
Exactly. So the sources conclude that two people with the same talent and motivation can end up on wildly different paths simply because one is in a low-cost system and the other is in a high-cost one.
The structure is the decisive factor.
It is.
So, after all this, what does it all mean for us? I think the central takeaway is that human prosperity isn't just about individual drive.
Yeah.
It's about consciously designing structures that minimize this relational friction. We have to align those binding forces, the mission, vision, values, and purpose, to shape what we do.
Structural alignment is what turns simple physical proximity into real, actual capability.
A well-designed structure just fundamentally reorganizes the entire relational landscape, doesn't it? It makes pathways that used to require a huge negotiation into something immediate, low-cost, and first degree.
The intentional design of our communities and our organizations, that's what ultimately governs what we can all accomplish together.
And that leads us to our final thought for you to consider. If capability grows when a structure reduces the energy needed for coordination, think about one specific high-friction relationship in your own life right now. How might that relationship be completely transformed if you redesigned its underlying mission, vision, values, and purpose?